My name is Elena Hartwell and I'm 34 years old. 3 days ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was: a devoted wife, a loving mother to my 8-year-old son Marcus, and a successful architect living in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. I had built what I believed was the perfect life with my husband of 9 years, Dr. David Hartwell, a respected cardiologist at Oregon Health and Science University. Our house was a testament to my architectural skills: clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and an open concept that made our 3,200 square feet feel even more spacious. But perfect lives, I've learned, are often the most fragile. It started with a phone call that wasn't meant for me. The digital clock on my nightstand read 11:47 p.m. when David's phone buzzed on his side of the bed. He was already asleep, his breathing deep, and even after a 14-hour shift at the hospital. I reached across his body, careful not to wake him, intending to silence the device. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, followed immediately by a text message preview that made my blood run cold. "The shipment arrives tomorrow. Make sure you're alone. V." I stared at the words, my mind struggling to process their meaning. Shipment? What shipment? David was a cardiologist, not someone who dealt with deliveries or shipments of any kind. Unless. If you've ever been betrayed by those you loved most, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're ready to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of manipulation. My hands trembling, I carefully lifted David's phone. His passcode was Marcus's birthday, at least I hoped it still was. The screen unlocked, revealing a text thread I'd never seen before. Scrolling up, I found dozens of messages spanning the past 6 months, all from this same number labeled simply as V. Package secured. Awaiting instructions. Client pleased with last delivery. Requesting larger quantity. Payment processed. $50,000 transferred to offshore account. The room seemed to tilt around me. $50,000? What offshore account? David and I shared our finances completely, or so I thought. I checked our joint banking app on my own phone. Our savings account showed the usual $23,000 we'd been building for Marcus's college fund. Nothing out of the ordinary. But if David had $50,000 I didn't know about? I scrolled further through the messages, my heart hammering against my ribs. The conversations were coded, careful, but the implications were becoming terrifyingly clear. Words like product, client, and distribution appeared frequently. Medical terminology was scattered throughout, but not in ways that made sense for legitimate practice. New batch tested. Purity at 77%. Ready for distribution to West Coast clients. My architect's mind, trained to see patterns and connections, began assembling a picture I didn't want to accept. David wasn't just a cardiologist. He was involved in something illegal, something that required coded messages, offshore accounts, and clandestine shipments. I took screenshots of several message threads, my hands shaking so badly I had to try multiple times to get clear images. Then I carefully placed his phone back exactly where it had been and lay in the darkness, listening to my husband's peaceful breathing. How long had this been going on? How had I missed the signs? I thought back over the past year, searching for clues I might have overlooked. David's late nights had increased, but he'd explained them as necessary for his research. He'd become more secretive about his phone, always taking it with him even to the bathroom. There had been unexplained absences, conferences I couldn't find online when I'd tried to look them up. And then there was the money. Small things I'd noticed but dismissed, expensive dinners he claimed were hospital-sponsored, designer clothes that appeared in his closet, a Rolex he said was a gift from a grateful patient. When I'd questioned the watch, he'd become defensive, accusing me of not trusting him, of being paranoid like my mother. My mother. The comparison still stung. Mom had suffered from severe anxiety and paranoid delusions in her final years, seeing conspiracies and threats everywhere. David knew how much I feared becoming like her, and he'd learned to use that fear to shut down my questions. But this wasn't paranoia. This was real. I must have dozed fitfully because the next thing I knew, David's alarm was chiming at 5:30 a.m. I feigned sleep as he moved around the bedroom, gathering his clothes and heading to the en suite bathroom. Through half-closed eyes, I watched him dress in his usual work attire, pressed khakis, button-down shirt, hospital ID badge clipped to his breast pocket. The picture of professional respectability. "Elena." His voice was soft, considerate. "I have an early surgery this morning. I'll probably be late tonight. There's a conference call with some colleagues in Geneva." Geneva. Another detail that might or might not be true. I made a noncommittal sound, pretending to be mostly asleep. He kissed my forehead gently. "Love you. Tell Marcus I'll try to make it to his soccer game on Saturday." After the front door closed and his BMW pulled out of the driveway, I lay in bed for another 20 minutes, my mind racing. Finally, I got up and padded to Marcus's room. My son was still sleeping, his dark hair tousled against the pillow, one arm wrapped around his stuffed elephant. He looked so innocent, so trusting. How could I protect him from something I didn't fully understand? In the kitchen, I made coffee with automatic movements while my thoughts churned. I needed more information, but I also needed to be careful. If David was involved in something dangerous, drawing attention to my suspicions could put Marcus and me at risk. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend and business partner, Rachel Morrison. "Coffee this morning? Need to discuss the Henderson project." Rachel and I had started our architectural firm 5 years ago after working together at a larger company. She was one of the few people who knew me well enough to sense when something was wrong. But could I trust her with this? Could I trust anyone? I typed back, "Can't today. Family stuff. Rain check." Instead of coffee with Rachel, I spent the morning researching. Using my laptop, I searched for any connection between David's hospital and pharmaceutical companies, drug distribution networks, anything that might explain the messages I'd seen. What I found made my stomach churn. Over the past 2 years, there had been several arrests of medical professionals involved in prescription drug trafficking. Doctors, nurses, and pharmacists had been caught selling opioids, stimulants, and other controlled substances to dealers and addicts. The profits were enormous. A single bottle of OxyContin could sell for thousands on the street. But David was a cardiologist, not an emergency room doctor or pain management specialist. How would he have access to these drugs? Then I remembered something. 3 months ago, David had mentioned taking on additional responsibilities at the hospital. He'd said it was administrative work, helping coordinate between different departments. What if those responsibilities gave him access to the pharmacy or drug storage areas? My phone rang, startling me from my research. David's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, honey," I answered, trying to keep my voice normal. "Hey, how's your morning going?" His voice was warm, familiar. The same voice that had whispered, "I love you" thousands of times over the past 9 years. "Good. Just working on some project proposals. How's surgery prep?" "Actually, there's been a change. The surgery was postponed, so I'm catching up on paperwork. Listen, I might need to step out this afternoon for a consultation at a private clinic. Won't be long." A consultation at a private clinic. Was that code for something else? "Okay," I said. "Will you be home for dinner?" "Should be." "Oh, and Elena? If anyone calls the house asking for me, just take a message. Don't give out any information about my schedule or whereabouts." My grip tightened on the phone. Why would someone be calling the house? "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he said quickly. "It's just, there's been some confusion with patient privacy laws. The hospital is being extra cautious about information sharing right now." It was a reasonable explanation, but something in his tone set off alarm bells. David was usually confident, articulate. Now he sounded evasive, almost nervous. "Of course," I said. "I'll be careful." "Good. Love you." "Love you too." After hanging up, I sat staring at my phone. The man I'd just spoken to was my husband, the father of my child, someone I'd shared nearly a decade of my life with. But he was also someone who received coded messages about shipments and offshore accounts, someone who was now warning me about mysterious phone calls. I needed to see his phone again. The opportunity came sooner than expected. At 1:30 p.m., Marcus's school called. He'd fallen during recess and needed to be picked up, nothing serious, but they wanted him checked by a doctor and he was asking for his mom. Of course, I'll be right there, I told the school nurse. But first, I made a detour to David's hospital. Oregon Health and Science University was a sprawling complex of buildings perched on a hill overlooking the city. I'd been there countless times over the years, accompanying David to hospital functions or bringing him forgotten items. The parking structure was a maze, but I knew it well. David's BMW was in its usual spot on level 3. My heart pounded as I approached the car, using the spare key he'd given me years ago. Inside, I searched quickly but thoroughly. The glove compartment held only the usual items: registration, insurance papers, breath mints. But in the center console, beneath a stack of medical journals, I found a second phone. This one was a basic model, nothing like the iPhone David usually carried. When I turned it on, it asked for a passcode. I tried Marcus's birthday, no luck. Our anniversary date, nothing. David's birthday, still nothing. Frustrated and running out of time, I tried one more combination, the date we'd first met, 9 years and 3 months ago. The phone unlocked. The message history made my blood run cold. This was clearly the phone used for the coded conversations I'd seen the night before. But scrolling through recent messages, I found something even more disturbing. Tonight's delivery confirmed. Meet at warehouse. Bring cash. The timestamp showed the message had been sent just 45 minutes ago. Tonight. Whatever David was involved in, something was happening tonight. I took photos of the most recent message threads, then carefully returned the phone to its hiding place. My hands were shaking as I locked the car and hurried back to my own vehicle. During the drive to Marcus's school, my mind raced through possibilities. Should I confront David? Contact the police? But what if I was wrong? What if there was an innocent explanation for everything I'd found? Marcus was waiting in the nurse's office with a bandaged knee and a sheepish expression. It doesn't hurt much, he assured me as we walked to the car. Can we get ice cream? We'll see, I said, helping him buckle his seatbelt. Looking at my son's trusting face, I felt a surge of protective fury. Whatever David was involved in, I wouldn't let it touch Marcus. That evening, David arrived home at his usual time, carrying takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. He seemed relaxed, normal, asking about Marcus's knee and my work projects. If not for the messages I'd seen, I would never have suspected anything was wrong. The consultation went well this afternoon, he mentioned casually while we ate. I should be finished with this project soon. Project. Not consultation, project. That's good, I said, forcing a smile. Will that mean fewer late nights? Definitely. Things should get back to normal soon. After dinner, David helped Marcus with homework while I cleaned the kitchen. The domestic scene was so ordinary, so peaceful, that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything. But when I glanced at the clock, 7:30 p.m., I remembered the message about tonight's delivery. At 9:15, after Marcus was in bed, David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked at me apologetically. I need to step out for a bit, he said. Emergency consultation. Shouldn't take long. This late? Critical patient. Private clinic. You know how it is. I nodded, though my heart was racing. Drive safely. After his car pulled away, I waited exactly 10 minutes before calling Rachel. Elena? It's late, is everything okay? Rachel, I need a favor. Can you come over and stay with Marcus for a couple of hours? I'll explain everything later, but I really need someone here. Of course. I'll be right over. 20 minutes later, Rachel arrived wearing pajama pants and a concerned expression. What's going on? I gave her the simplified version. I suspected David was lying about where he was going, and I needed to follow him. Rachel's eyes widened, but she didn't ask too many questions. Just be careful, she said. And call me if you need anything. Using the location sharing feature on our phones, I'd been tracking David's movements since he left. His car was currently stationary at an address in an industrial part of southeast Portland, nowhere near any hospital or clinic. The drive took 25 minutes through increasingly run-down neighborhoods. The address led me to a row of warehouses, most of which appeared abandoned. David's BMW was parked behind the third building, along with two other vehicles I didn't recognize. I parked across the street and slightly down the block, close enough to observe but far enough away to avoid detection. The warehouse had a few lit windows and I could see shadows moving inside. Then I saw David. He emerged from a side door carrying a large duffel bag. Even from a distance I could see the tension in his posture. He looked around nervously before loading the bag into his trunk and pulling out a smaller case. My husband, the man who saved lives, who'd taught Marcus to ride a bike, who brought me flowers every anniversary, was clearly involved in some kind of criminal transaction. Two other men exited the warehouse. One was tall and thin with closely cropped hair. The other was shorter, stockier, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. They spoke with David for several minutes, their body language suggesting serious business. Money changed hands. The shorter man gave David an envelope, which my husband quickly pocketed without counting the contents. I was so focused on the exchange that I almost missed the approaching car. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the warehouse lot, and suddenly the atmosphere changed. The three men scattered, David and the tall man heading for their vehicles while the shorter man ran back into the warehouse. The SUV's doors opened and 4 people got out. Even from my distance I could see they were armed. This was going wrong. Very wrong. I fumbled for my phone, torn between calling 911 and calling David to warn him. Before I could decide, gunshots echoed across the empty lot. David's car peeled out of the lot with a screech of tires, but the tall man wasn't as lucky. He was on the ground beside his vehicle, not moving. The SUV gave chase as David's BMW raced toward the street. I started my own engine, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. Whatever my husband was involved in, people were dying because of it. I followed at a distance as the chase wound through empty industrial streets. David was driving erratically, running red lights and taking corners too fast. The SUV stayed close behind him. Then, suddenly, both vehicles disappeared around a corner. When I reached the same intersection, there was no sign of either car. I drove the most likely routes back toward our neighborhood, my heart hammering and my mind spinning with questions. How long had this been going on? How much danger were Marcus and I in? Should I take my son and run? David's car was in our driveway when I arrived home 20 minutes later. All the lights in the house were off except for the porch light I'd left on. I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to decide what to do. When I finally went inside, I found David in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. His clothes were disheveled and I could smell fear sweat on him. "David." He looked up and I saw an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of guilt, fear, and something that might have been relief. "Elena, how long have you been home?" "Just got back from Rachel's," I lied. "She needed help with some legal documents." "Are you okay? You look upset." For a moment I thought he might tell me the truth. His mouth opened, then closed. Finally, he shook his head. "Long day. I'm just tired." I nodded and began getting ready for bed, my movements automatic while my mind raced. David went through his usual nighttime routine, brushing teeth, checking the doors, setting his alarm. Everything normal except for the tension radiating from him. As we lay in the dark, I listened to his breathing. It took nearly an hour before it shifted to the deep, even rhythm of sleep. Only then did I allow myself to think about what I'd witnessed. A drug deal gone wrong. A man possibly dead. My husband fleeing from armed criminals. And somewhere in the city, those people in the SUV were still out there. I must have dozed because I woke to the sound of breaking glass. The bedroom was still dark, but my phone showed 3:17 a.m. Beside me, David was sitting up, instantly alert. "What was that?" I whispered. "Stay here." His voice was tense, controlled. He opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out something I'd never seen before, a handgun. David, what? Stay here with Marcus, he hissed. Don't come out no matter what you hear. He crept from the room, leaving me alone with my racing heart and 1,000 terrifying questions. When had David gotten a gun? How long had he been hiding it in our bedroom? I heard voices downstairs, David's and at least 2 others I didn't recognize. The conversation was too quiet to make out words, but the tone was clearly hostile. Moving as silently as possible, I slipped from bed and crept to Marcus's room. My son was still sleeping peacefully, unaware that our world was falling apart around him. From the hallway, I could hear the voices more clearly. Told you this was temporary. David's voice strained. Change in plans, needs to be permanent now. A man's voice, unfamiliar. My family has nothing to do with this. David again, pleading. Everyone has something to do with it now. The conversation continued for another few minutes before I heard the front door close. David's footsteps on the stairs were slow, heavy. When he appeared in the hallway, I was waiting. Who was that? I asked quietly. David's face was pale in the dim light from Marcus's nightlight. Colleagues. Hospital business. At 3 in the morning? With a gun. He looked down at the weapon in his hand as if surprised to find it there. Elena, I can explain. Then explain, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Explain the coded messages. Explain the second phone. Explain the gun. Explain why people are breaking into our house in the middle of the night. The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours. Finally, David set the gun on the hallway table and sank against the wall. You've been watching me. It wasn't a question and I didn't deny it. I found your phone. I followed you tonight. His head fell back against the wall. God, Elena. I never wanted you to be involved in this. Involved in what? It started small, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. A favor for a colleague. He needed someone to write a few extra prescriptions, and I needed money for Marcus's school tuition. It was supposed to be temporary. The admission hit me like a physical blow. You're selling drugs. Not selling. Facilitating. There's a difference. Is there? Because what I saw tonight looked like selling to me. David's eyes met mine, and I saw the fear there. The people I work with, they don't accept resignations. I tried to get out 6 months ago, but they made it clear that wasn't an option. What people? A distribution network. They supply certain clients with pharmaceuticals that are difficult to obtain through traditional channels. You mean drug dealers? It's more complicated than that. Is it? Because a man was shot tonight, David. Shot. And those people who were just in our house, they didn't sound like they were here to discuss your resignation. David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. Viktor Petrov runs the operation. He's not someone you cross and live to tell about it. Viktor. The V who's been texting you. Yes. And tonight's deal went wrong. Someone tipped off a rival group, and now Viktor thinks there's a leak in his organization. My blood ran cold. Does he think you're the leak? I don't know. Maybe. The people who were here tonight, they weren't here to talk. They were here to search the house. Search for what? Evidence. Records. Anything that could implicate Viktor or his operation. I thought about the screenshots I'd taken of David's messages, currently stored on my phone upstairs. Did they find anything? No. I don't keep anything here. I'm not stupid, Elena. Aren't you? The words came out harsher than I'd intended. You brought criminals to our house. To where our son sleeps. How is that not stupid? David flinched as if I'd slapped him. I'm trying to protect you both. By lying to me for months? By getting involved with people who break into houses at 3 in the morning? I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if that was true. We stood in the hallway, 10 feet and 9 years of marriage between us, staring at each other like strangers. What happens now? I asked finally. I don't know. Victor's paranoid right now. He might decide the best way to eliminate any loose ends is to. David stopped himself. Is to what? It doesn't matter. I won't let anything happen to you or Marcus. But looking at my husband, really looking at him, I saw a man who was afraid, desperate, and possibly in over his head. How could he protect us when he couldn't even protect himself? I need time to think, I said. David nodded miserably. Elena, whatever you decide. I love you. I've loved you since the day we met, and everything I've done has been to give our family a better life. A better life? I gestured toward the gun on the table. Is this better? He had no answer for that. I spent the rest of the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything I'd learned. By morning, I'd reached a decision. When David left for the hospital at his usual time, I waited 30 minutes before putting my plan into action. First, I called in sick to work, telling my assistant I had a family emergency. Then I called Marcus's school and informed them he wouldn't be in due to a family matter. Are we going somewhere, Mom? Marcus asked over breakfast, clearly picking up on my nervous energy. Maybe, I said. How would you feel about visiting Grandma Sarah for a few days? My mother-in-law lived in Seattle, a 3-hour drive north. She adored Marcus and wouldn't ask too many questions about a spontaneous visit. Can I bring Mr. Elephant? Marcus asked, referring to his stuffed animal. Of course. While Marcus packed a bag, I gathered essentials, our passports, birth certificates, the emergency cash I kept hidden in my closet, and my laptop. I also made copies of the screenshots from David's phone, storing them on a USB drive that I hid in Marcus's backpack. The hardest part was writing the note I left for David. I know about Viktor Petrov. I know about the drugs. I've taken Marcus somewhere safe while I decide what to do with this information. Don't try to find us and don't involve us in any more of your business. I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk. Elena. We were on the road by 10 a.m., Marcus chattering excitedly about seeing Grandma Sarah while I kept checking the rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. 3 hours later, we were sitting in Sarah Hartwell's cozy kitchen while she fussed over Marcus and peppered me with questions I couldn't answer honestly. David had to work, I said. Last-minute surgery. You know how it is. Sarah nodded sympathetically. She'd been a doctor's wife herself before David's father died 5 years ago. That evening, after Marcus was asleep in the guest room, I sat on Sarah's back porch with a glass of wine and my laptop, researching Viktor Petrov. What I found terrified me. Viktor Petrov was a name that appeared in dozens of news articles spanning the past decade. Drug trafficking, money laundering, suspected involvement in several unsolved murders. He'd been arrested multiple times but never convicted. Witnesses had a tendency to disappear or recant their testimony. This was the man my husband worked for. This was the man who now knew where we lived, where Marcus went to school, where I worked. My phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. Elena, where are you? Are you and Marcus safe? We're fine, I said. We're not coming home until this is over. This can't be over. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Viktor doesn't just let people walk away. Then you'll have to find a way to make him. Elena, listen to me. Viktor's people searched the house again today. They think I'm working with the FBI. My blood ran cold. Are you? No. But it doesn't matter what's true. It matters what Viktor believes. What are you saying? I'm saying we might not be safe anywhere. Any of us. I ended the call with shaking hands and immediately checked all the doors and windows in Sarah's house. My mother-in-law found me doing this an hour later. Elena, honey, what's going on? You've been jumpy all day. I looked at this kind woman who'd welcomed me into her family 9 years ago, who'd held my hand during Marcus's difficult birth, who'd never questioned my decision to marry her son. How could I tell her that her beloved David was involved with dangerous criminals? Just work stress, I lied. Big project deadline. But Sarah wasn't fooled. This isn't about work. Does this have something to do with David? Before I could answer, Marcus appeared in the hallway in his pajamas. Mom? Can't sleep. Can you read me a story? I spent the next hour in the guest room, reading to my son and marveling at his resilience. Children adapted so quickly, accepted change with such grace. If only adults could do the same. When I finally returned to the living room, Sarah was waiting with 2 cups of tea. Now, she said firmly, tell me what's really going on. So I did. I told her about the messages, the secret phone, the warehouse, the men who'd broken into our house. I told her about Viktor Petrov and the drug operation and my fear that none of us were safe. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. Oh, Elena, she said when I finished. Oh, my dear girl. I don't know what to do, I admitted. If I go to the police, they'll arrest David. But if I don't, people might die. What does your instinct tell you? That I need to protect Marcus at any cost. Sarah nodded slowly. Then that's what you do. The next morning brought a development I hadn't expected. My phone rang at 7 a.m., displaying a number I didn't recognize. Elena Hartwell? The voice was crisp, professional. Yes? This is Agent Jennifer Martinez with the FBI. I need to speak with you about your husband's activities. My heart stopped. I'm sorry, what? Dr. David Hartwell is currently under federal investigation for his involvement in a drug trafficking operation. We believe you may have information relevant to our case. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. How did you get this number? Mrs. Hartwell, I understand this is shocking. But we need to meet as soon as possible. Your husband's associates are dangerous people, and we believe you and your son may be at risk. At risk how? Viktor Petrov has ordered the elimination of anyone who might testify against his operation. That includes family members who might have access to incriminating information. The room seemed to spin around me. You're saying they want to kill us? I'm saying we need to get you into protective custody immediately. Where are you currently located? I hesitated. Could I trust this agent? How did I know she was really FBI? I need to verify your identity first, I said. Of course. Call the Seattle FBI field office and ask for Agent Martinez. They'll confirm my credentials and transfer you to me. After hanging up, I did exactly that. Agent Jennifer Martinez was indeed a federal agent assigned to investigate Viktor Petrov's organization. When she came back on the line, her voice was urgent. Mrs. Hartwell, we don't have much time. Petrov's people are looking for you. We intercepted communications suggesting they've tracked you to the Seattle area. How is that possible? Your husband's phone is being monitored. Any calls between you are being traced. David. I'd been talking to David and now they knew where we were. What do you need from me? I asked. Everything you know about your husband's involvement with Petrov. Any evidence you might have. In exchange, we'll provide protection for you and your son. And David? If he cooperates with our investigation, we might be able to work out a deal. But Mrs. Hartwell, you need to understand, your husband is in serious trouble. The charges he's facing could result in decades in prison. I thought about Marcus, sleeping peacefully upstairs, trusting that his mother would keep him safe. Whatever David had done, my son didn't deserve to suffer for it. I have screenshots of text messages, I said. And I witnessed a drug transaction that went wrong 2 nights ago. Perfect. Can you meet me this afternoon? What about my son? He'll be safe. We have protocols for protecting families in situations like this. After agreeing to meet Agent Martinez at a neutral location in downtown Seattle, I had the difficult task of explaining to Marcus that we needed to talk to some police officers. Are we in trouble? He asked, his eyes wide with concern. No, sweetheart. But Daddy might be, and we need to help some people understand what happened. Is Daddy a bad guy? The question broke my heart. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that the man who taught him to throw a football, who read him bedtime stories, who promised to always protect him, had made choices that put their entire family in danger? Daddy made some mistakes, I said carefully. But he's still your daddy and he loves you very much. The FBI field office was an imposing glass and steel building in downtown Seattle. Agent Martinez met us in the lobby, a woman in her 40s with short dark hair and intelligent eyes. She was kind to Marcus, showing him to a room with toys and books while a female agent stayed with him. In the conference room, I told Agent Martinez everything I knew. She recorded our conversation and took copies of the screenshots I'd saved from David's phone. "This is excellent evidence," she said after reviewing the messages. "Combined with what we already have, it should be enough to bring charges against Petrov and his entire organization." What happens to David? That depends on his willingness to cooperate. If he testifies against Petrov, the prosecution might consider a reduced sentence. And us? Witness protection is a possibility, depending on the level of threat assessment. At minimum, we'll provide security until Petrov is arrested. As if summoned by our conversation, Agent Martinez's phone rang. She answered it, her expression growing grave as she listened. "I understand," she said finally. "We'll be ready." She hung up and turned to me. "Mrs. Hartwell, there's been a development. Your husband contacted our Seattle office this morning. He wants to make a deal." Relief flooded through me. He's cooperating? He's offering to testify against Petrov in exchange for protection for his family. But there's a complication. What kind of complication? Petrov has accelerated his timeline. We have intelligence suggesting he's planning to eliminate all potential witnesses within the next 48 hours. Including David? Including all of you. The next few hours passed in a blur of safe houses, security briefings, and urgent phone calls. Marcus was confused and frightened by all the activity, but he was remarkably brave, accepting each new development with the adaptability that children possess. David arrived at the safe house that evening, escorted by 2 federal agents. He looked haggard, older than his 36 years, but his face lit up when he saw Marcus. "Daddy." Marcus ran to him, and David gathered our son into a fierce hug. Our reunion was awkward, strained by everything that had happened. But watching David with Marcus, seeing the genuine love and relief in his eyes, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. Later, after Marcus was asleep in one of the safe house bedrooms, David and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table like adversaries at a negotiation. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of it. For lying to you, for putting you and Marcus in danger, for destroying our life." "Why did you do it?" "Money at first. Marcus's school tuition, your student loans, the mortgage. I thought I could make some quick cash and get out." "But you didn't get out." "No. Victor made it clear that wasn't an option. Once you're in until he decides otherwise." "How long?" 18 months. It started with writing a few extra prescriptions for anxiety medication. Wealthy clients who didn't want to go through traditional channels. Then it escalated to pain medications, stimulants, anything with street value. "And the offshore accounts?" David's face flushed with shame. "Victor insisted on that arrangement. Said it was safer for everyone if the money was kept separate from our regular finances." "How much money?" "Total? About $200,000. I stared at him in disbelief. $200,000? David, we could have paid off our mortgage, Marcus's college fund, everything." "It wasn't that simple. Most of it went back into the operation, buying supplies, paying off other people in the network. I maybe kept 20%. $40,000, I said flatly. "You risked our family for $40,000? "I risked our family because I was trying to provide for it." His voice rose, then immediately dropped as he remembered Marcus sleeping nearby. "Do you know what it's like to watch other doctors driving luxury cars, sending their kids to elite schools, taking month-long vacations, while we're struggling to pay basic bills?" "We weren't struggling, David. We were middle class, comfortable. There's a difference. Comfortable isn't enough when you're surrounded by people who have everything. I looked at this man I'd married, this father of my child, and realized I was seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. David hadn't gotten involved with criminals because we needed money. He'd done it because he wanted more money, because his ego couldn't handle being merely comfortable while his colleagues were wealthy. The FBI says Victor is planning to kill all potential witnesses, I said, changing the subject. Including us. David nodded grimly. Victor doesn't take chances. Anyone who might testify against him is a liability. So what's the plan? I testify. Victor gets arrested. We enter witness protection if necessary. Witness protection? The implications hit me like a physical blow. New names, new identities, never seeing our families again? It might not come to that. If Victor is convicted and his organization dismantled, the threat level drops significantly. And if he's not convicted? David was quiet for a long moment. Then we disappear completely. I thought about my architectural firm, the projects I'd spent years developing, the life I'd built. Rachel would have to take over everything. My clients would never know what happened to me. Sarah would lose her son and grandson simultaneously. There has to be another way, I said. Elena, these people don't just threaten. They follow through. The man who was shot at the warehouse 2 nights ago? He was Victor's accountant. He tried to skim money from the operation and Victor made an example of him. Is he dead? No, but he's in intensive care. Victor wanted him to survive, wanted him to remember what happens to people who cross him. A chill ran down my spine. And you think he'd do the same to us? Worse. Victor has a particular hatred for law enforcement and anyone who cooperates with them. If he thinks I'm working with the FBI. David didn't need to finish the sentence. The message was clear. Cooperating with the investigation was dangerous, but not cooperating was probably fatal. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Agent Martinez arrived at the safe house with a grim expression and urgent energy. We have a problem, she announced. Victor Petrov has disappeared. What do you mean, disappeared? David asked. He didn't show up for a scheduled meeting with his lieutenant yesterday. His apartment is empty, his usual haunts are deserted. We think he's gone underground. Or fled the country, I suggested. Possible, but unlikely. Victor has too much invested in his Pacific Northwest operation to just abandon it. More likely he's planning something big. Like what? Like eliminating all the evidence against him before we can build our case. Agent Martinez turned to David. We need you to testify before a grand jury as soon as possible. Today, if we can arrange it. What about protective custody for my family? That continues regardless. But David, if Victor is planning to run or escalate violence, we need your testimony on record now. While David prepared for his grand jury appearance, I found myself alone with Marcus in the safe house living room. My son was playing with action figures, creating elaborate scenarios where the heroes always won and the villains were safely captured. If only real life were so simple. Mom? Marcus looked up from his toys. When are we going home? I knelt beside him, choosing my words carefully. I don't know, sweetheart. We might need to stay in different places for a while. Because of the bad people? Children heard everything, understood more than adults gave them credit for. Yes, because of the bad people. Will Daddy keep us safe? I looked at my son's trusting face and felt something break inside my chest. Daddy and I will both keep you safe. That's a promise. But even as I said the words, I wondered if they were true. How could we keep Marcus safe when we didn't even know where the danger might come from? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your husband made a mistake. But it's not too late to fix it. My blood turned to ice. Victor had my phone number. I immediately showed the message to Agent Martinez, who swore under her breath and made several urgent phone calls. We're moving you, she announced 15 minutes later. New safe house, new security protocol. How did he get my number? Could be any number of ways. The important thing is that he's reaching out instead of just acting. That suggests he wants something. What could he possibly want from me? Information about what you know, what evidence you have, whether your husband is truly cooperating with us or playing both sides. As we gathered our few belongings, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Victor. Check your email. With Agent Martinez looking over my shoulder, I opened my email app. There was a new message from an encrypted account, no subject line. The body contained only a video file. Don't open that, Agent Martinez warned. It could contain malware. But I was already clicking the file. The video quality was grainy, clearly shot from a surveillance camera. It showed the exterior of Marcus's school, children playing on the playground during recess. The timestamp indicated it had been recorded yesterday. He's been watching Marcus, I whispered. The video continued for another 30 seconds, focusing on my son as he played with his friends, completely unaware that he was being observed by dangerous people. Then the video cut to a different location, my architectural firm's office building. The camera followed Rachel as she entered the building, carrying her usual morning coffee. He's threatening my friends too, I said, my voice barely audible. Agent Martinez was already on her radio, coordinating additional security for both locations. But the message was clear: Victor could reach anyone in our lives, anywhere, anytime. My phone rang. Unknown number again. Answer it, Agent Martinez instructed. Keep him talking while we try to trace the call. I accepted the call with shaking hands. Hello? Elena. The voice was smooth, accented slightly. Russian, maybe. My name is Viktor Petrov. I know who you are. Good. That saves us time. I understand your husband has been speaking with federal agents. I wouldn't know. We're separated. Victor laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Please don't insult my intelligence. You're currently in protective custody, your son is with you, and your husband testified before a grand jury 3 hours ago. The level of detail was terrifying. How much did Victor know about our situation? What do you want? I asked. I want to propose a solution that benefits everyone. Your husband stops cooperating with the FBI. You disappear for a few months until this investigation dies down. In exchange, I forget that any of you exist. And if we don't agree? Then I stop forgetting that you exist. The threat was clear but not explicit, the hallmark of someone who understood how law enforcement traced communications. I need time to think, I said. You have 24 hours. I'll call again tomorrow evening with instructions. The line went dead. Agent Martinez immediately began making calls, coordinating with technical teams and field agents. But I could see the concern in her expression. Were you able to trace it? I asked. Partially. The call was routed through several servers, but we got a general location. He's still in the Seattle area. Which means he's not running. Which means he's planning something. David returned from his grand jury testimony that evening, looking drained but determined. His appearance before the grand jury had gone well. They'd voted to indict Viktor Petrov and 6 associates on federal drug trafficking charges. It's done, he told me. I told them everything. Names, dates, amounts, the whole operation. Victor called me today, I said, and watched David's face go pale. After I described the conversation and the threatening video, David sank into a chair and put his head in his hands. We should have run, he said. The moment I got involved with Victor, we should have taken Marcus and disappeared. You can't change the past, I said. What matters now is protecting our son. How? Victor has people everywhere. If he wants to find us, he will. Agent Martinez, who had been listening to our conversation, spoke up. Not necessarily. Victor's organization is sophisticated, but it's not omnipotent. We've been tracking his network for 2 years. We know his capabilities and his limitations. Then why haven't you arrested him before now? David asked. Because we needed someone on the inside willing to testify. Someone like you. The weight of responsibility settled on David's shoulders visibly. So if I hadn't cooperated, Victor would have continued operating indefinitely. Your testimony is the key to shutting down the entire network. That night, as Marcus slept between David and me in the safe house's master bedroom, I lay awake thinking about choices and consequences. David had made the choice to get involved with criminals. I had made the choice to investigate his behavior. Agent Martinez had made the choice to use us as bait in a larger investigation. But Marcus had made no choices. He was 8 years old, innocent, trusting. Whatever happened next, my primary obligation was to protect him. At 3 a.m., I made my own choice. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake David or Marcus, and went to the kitchen where I'd left my phone. There was one person I hadn't contacted since this all began, one person who might have insights that law enforcement couldn't provide. My brother Michael lived in Vancouver, just across the Canadian border. He worked in private security, specializing in corporate espionage and executive protection. We hadn't spoken in months after a family disagreement, but Michael understood dangerous people and how they operated. I sent him a carefully worded text, "Need to talk. Family emergency. Can you call me on this number?" Michael called back within minutes. "Elena? What's wrong?" I gave him the condensed version, David's involvement with drug traffickers, the FBI investigation, the threats against our family. "Jesus, Elena. How long has this been going on?" "I only found out 3 days ago. But David's been involved for over a year." "And you're in protective custody?" "Yes, but the main guy, Victor Petrov, he contacted me directly. He wants David to stop cooperating with the FBI." Michael was quiet for a moment. "Petrov? I've heard that name. He's connected to some very serious people. Russian organized crime." "How serious?" "The kind of serious where people disappear permanently. Elena, you need to get out of the country. The FBI says they can protect us." "The FBI can protect you from ordinary criminals. But if Petrov has connections to Russian organized crime, he has resources they don't. Money, international networks, people who specialize in making problems disappear." "What are you suggesting?" "Bring Marcus to Vancouver. Tonight. I have contacts who can get you new identities, safe passage to somewhere Petrov can't reach you." "That would mean abandoning David." "David made his choices. Now you need to make yours. What's more important, loyalty to your husband or your son's life?" The question hung in the air between us. Michael was right, of course. If Victor Petrov was as dangerous as everyone claimed, staying and hoping law enforcement could protect us was a massive gamble. But leaving David meant abandoning him to face the consequences alone. It meant Marcus growing up without his father. It meant accepting that our marriage, our family, was truly over. "I need time to think," I said. "You don't have time. Every hour you delay is another hour for Petrov to locate you and plan his next move." After hanging up with Michael, I sat in the safe house kitchen, weighing my options. Through the window, I could see 2 FBI agents in an unmarked car, maintaining their surveillance. They looked alert, professional, committed to protecting us. But they also looked very young. I was still sitting there when David appeared in the doorway, wearing pajama pants and a concerned expression. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Too much to think about." He poured himself a glass of water and sat across from me. "I heard you on the phone. Who were you talking to?" I told him about my conversation with Michael, about the option of fleeing to Canada. David listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. "Your brother's right," he said finally. "You should take Marcus and go." "And leave you here?" "I created this mess. I should be the one to face the consequences. Marcus needs his father. Marcus needs to be alive more than he needs his father." We sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in thought. Finally, David spoke again. "Elena, there's something I haven't told you. About Victor." My stomach clenched. "What?" "He didn't just threaten our family today. He made me an offer too." What kind of offer? If I refuse to testify at his trial, he'll let us disappear. New identities, enough money to start over somewhere safe. In exchange for letting him continue his drug operation? Yes. And you're considering it? David met my eyes. I'm considering anything that keeps you and Marcus safe. Before I could respond, Agent Martinez burst into the kitchen, her weapon drawn and her expression grim. We need to move. Now, she said. Victor's people have found the safe house. Through the kitchen window, I could see our surveillance team was no longer in their car. Instead, there were 3 black SUVs parked on the street, and shadowy figures moving between the vehicles. Where's Marcus? I asked, already moving toward the bedroom. I'll get him, David said. You pack whatever you can carry. But as we reached the hallway, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Back door, Agent Martinez whispered. There's an evacuation vehicle in the alley. We crept through the house, Marcus now awake and clinging to David's neck with wide, frightened eyes. At the back door, Agent Martinez peered through the curtains. Clear, she said. Move fast. We burst through the door into the cold night air. Behind us, I heard the front door of the safe house splinter and crash open. The evacuation vehicle was a black SUV identical to the ones out front. Agent Martinez pushed us into the back seat and jumped behind the wheel. The engine was already running. Stay down, she ordered as we pulled out of the alley. Through the rear window, I could see muzzle flashes from inside the safe house. Victor's people were shooting at FBI agents who were no longer there. Where are we going? David asked. Secondary safe house, Agent Martinez replied, her attention focused on the dark streets around us. Location unknown to anyone except federal marshals. But as we drove through the city, I noticed Agent Martinez repeatedly checking her mirrors. We were being followed. How many cars? I asked. 2 that I can see. Probably more. She made a series of turns, trying to lose our pursuit, but the headlights stayed with us. They're not trying to catch us, Agent Martinez said after several minutes. They're hurting us. Toward what? I don't know. But we're not going to find out. She pulled a sharp right turn into a parking garage, tires squealing against concrete. We spiraled up through several levels before she parked behind a concrete pillar. Everyone out, she ordered. We're switching vehicles. On the 3rd level, there was another SUV waiting, this one driven by a federal marshal I didn't recognize. Agent Martinez quickly transferred our few belongings while the marshal briefed her in whispered, urgent tones. There's been a development, Agent Martinez told us as we settled into the new vehicle. Viktor Petrov has been arrested. Relief flooded through me. It's over? Not exactly. The arrest was based on an outstanding warrant from a different jurisdiction. He'll be released on bail within hours unless we can file additional charges based on David's testimony. How does that help us? It buys us time. 12 hours, maybe 24, before Victor is back on the street and able to coordinate retaliation. As we drove to the new safe house, a nondescript hotel on the outskirts of the city, I felt the weight of our situation settling on my shoulders. We had perhaps one day before Viktor Petrov was free and able to act on his threats. One day to decide whether to trust the federal system to protect us, or to take Michael's advice and disappear into Canada. One day to choose between staying together as a family or prioritizing Marcus's safety above all else. In the hotel room, while Marcus slept fitfully between David and me, I made the most difficult decision of my life. At dawn, I would call my brother Michael and ask him to help us disappear. But I wouldn't tell David until it was too late for him to stop me. The next morning, while David was meeting with federal prosecutors to prepare for Victor's arraignment, I put my plan into action. We're going to visit a friend of Mommy's, I told Marcus as we left the hotel under FBI escort. It'll be a fun adventure. Agent Martinez was suspicious but not alarmed when I asked to stop at a specific coffee shop in downtown Seattle. I need caffeine, I explained. And Marcus wants a muffin. Inside the coffee shop, Michael was waiting at a corner table, looking every inch the security professional in his dark suit and alert posture. Our reunion was brief, a quick hug and whispered conversation while Marcus was distracted by a display of pastries. "Everything's arranged," Michael said quietly. "There's a boat leaving from Pier 47 in 2 hours. It'll take you to a small marina north of Vancouver." "What about documents?" "I have a contact who specializes in emergency identities. You'll be Elena and Marcus Walsh by tonight." "And David?" Michael's expression was sympathetic but firm. "He made his choice when he got involved with these people. Now you're making yours." I looked at Marcus, who was carefully selecting a chocolate chip muffin, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. "How will I contact you?" "You won't. At least not for several months. The less connection you have to your old life, the safer you'll be." Michael handed me an envelope. Cash, new credit cards, phone numbers for emergency contacts in Vancouver. Everything you need to start over. Back in the FBI vehicle, Agent Martinez noticed my nervous energy but attributed it to stress. We returned to the hotel, where I packed our belongings while Marcus watched cartoons. At 1 p.m., I told Agent Martinez I needed to take Marcus for a walk. "For his mental health," I explained. "All this sitting in hotel rooms is making him anxious." It was true, Marcus had been unusually quiet and clingy since the previous night's drama. But it was also the cover I needed for our escape. We walked to nearby Pike Place Market, ostensibly to buy Marcus a toy and get some fresh air. Agent Martinez and her partner followed at a discreet distance, professional but not intrusive. At 1:47 p.m., exactly as Michael had instructed, I received a text: "Fire alarm at hotel. Return immediately." I showed the message to Agent Martinez, who immediately contacted her team. The response was swift. There was indeed a fire alarm at our hotel, and all occupants were being evacuated. In the confusion of coordinating our return and ensuring the hotel was secure, no one noticed when Marcus and I slipped away from the market crowd and into a waiting taxi. "Pier 47, I told the driver. 20 minutes later, we were boarding a small fishing boat operated by a man who spoke very little English but clearly knew Michael well. As Seattle's skyline receded behind us, Marcus stood at the boat's rail, watching the city disappear. "Are we never going home?" he asked. I knelt beside him, gathering him into my arms. "We're going to a new home. A safe home." "What about Daddy?" The question I'd been dreading. "Daddy has to stay and help the police catch the bad people. But he loves you very much and someday we'll see him again." It was a lie, of course. If Viktor Petrov was as dangerous as everyone claimed, David might not survive long enough for any reunion. But children need hope, even when adults have none. The crossing to Canada took 3 hours. By evening, Marcus and I were in a small apartment in Vancouver, our new temporary home arranged by Michael's contacts. That night, I called David's phone from a burner device Michael had provided. "Elena? Thank God. Where are you? The FBI says you disappeared from Pike Place Market." "We're safe," I said. "That's all you need to know." "Elena, you can't just run. Viktor was released on bail this afternoon. Without my testimony." "Your testimony is what put us in danger in the first place. Please come back. We can face this together." "No, David. You can face this. Marcus and I are starting over." "What about our marriage? Our family?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 9 years together, the memories of love and trust and shared dreams. "You destroyed our family when you chose money over our safety," I said quietly. "I'm just protecting what's left." I ended the call and immediately discarded the phone. 6 months later, Elena and Marcus Walsh were settled into their new life in a small town outside Vancouver. Marcus was thriving in his new school, making friends and adapting with the resilience only children possess. I found work with a local architectural firm, my skills translating easily across borders. We lived quietly, carefully, always aware that our safety depended on remaining invisible. Sometimes, late at night, I would search online for news about Viktor Petrov's case. David had indeed testified, and Viktor had been convicted on multiple federal charges. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. But Viktor had associates, people who might still harbor grudges against those who had testified against him. We stayed hidden. 1 year after our escape, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single newspaper clipping, an obituary for Dr. David Hartwell, age 37, who had died in a car accident while driving home from the federal courthouse. The article mentioned that Dr. Hartwell had been a key witness in a major drug trafficking case, and that police were investigating whether his death was connected to his testimony. I read the obituary 3 times before the reality sank in. David was dead. Marcus, now 9 years old and calling himself Mark Walsh, found me crying in our small kitchen that evening. "What's wrong, Mom?" I gathered him into my arms, breathing in the scent of his hair, marveling at how much he'd grown in our year of freedom. "I just got some sad news about an old friend," I said. "Someone from before?" "Before." That's how we referred to our life in Seattle, everything that had happened before we became Elena and Marcus Walsh. "Yes, from before. Are you okay?" I looked at my son, this brave, resilient child who had adapted to a new country, a new identity, a new life, all because his mother had chosen safety over everything else. "I'm okay," I said. "As long as I have you, I'm okay." And it was true. We had lost everything, our home, our family, our history, but we had gained something more valuable, our lives. 2 years later, we're still Elena and Marcus Walsh. We've built a good life in Canada, quiet and safe. Marcus is 11 now, plays hockey and speaks with a slight Canadian accent. He rarely asks about his father anymore, though I see David's features in his face every day. Sometimes I wonder if we could have handled things differently. If David could have refused Viktor's initial offer, if I could have discovered his involvement sooner, if the FBI could have provided better protection. But those are questions without answers, roads not taken. What matters is that we survived. We escaped. We chose life over loyalty, safety over sentiment. And every morning when I watch Mark, head off to school with his backpack and his hockey stick, I know I made the right choice. The truth is rarely pure and never simple, as Oscar Wilde once wrote. But sometimes survival is both. My name is Elena Walsh now, and I am 36 years old. I am the mother of a remarkable boy, an architect building a small but meaningful practice, and a woman who learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to run. I thought I knew who I was 3 years ago. I was wrong. But I know who I am now, a survivor.